Today, we're diving into the chaotic birth of Germany's first democracy. And let me tell you, these weren't just growing pains. This was an all-out fight for survival, from the literal first minute.
And that's really the core question here, isn't it? I mean, just try to imagine it. You're a brand new government born from the ashes of a devastating war, and immediately you have enemies coming at you from every single direction. It's a situation that seems almost impossible to win.
So, let's set the scene. World War I is over. The Kaiser is gone. And a new government, led by a guy named Friedrich Ebert, is trying to pick up the pieces. But its very first major act? Signing the Treaty of Versailles. And for millions of Germans, this wasn't a peace treaty, it was a national humiliation. This act immediately poisoned the well, tying this new democracy to defeat right from the get-go.
And the first test came almost instantly. But it didn't come from the old guard, the monarchists, or the generals. Nope. It came from the radical left, from people who believed the German Revolution hadn't gone nearly far enough.
So, who were these people? They were called the Spartacist League. They looked at what the Bolsheviks had just done in Russia, and they thought, we want that here. Their goal was to completely tear down the new republic and replace it with a communist state, run by councils of workers.
And leading the charge were two incredibly dedicated revolutionaries, Rosa Luxemburg, famously known as Red Rosa, and Karl Liebknecht. These weren't just figureheads, they were the brains and the passionate voices behind this dream of a communist Germany.
And you have to see just how fast this all exploded. On January 4th, the government sacks a police chief who's popular with the workers. The very next day, the streets of Berlin are flooded with protesters. By January 6th, the Spartacists see their opening and call for a full-blown revolution. It's like someone lit a match in a powder keg.
This put Ebert's new government in a really bad spot. The regular army was just a shadow of its former self, totally shattered by the war. There was no way he could count on them to defend the Republic from a revolt happening right in the capital city.
So what do you do when your own army can't help you? Well, Ebert was backed into a corner, and he made a decision that many people, then and now, would say was a deal with the devil. He turned to a group that should have been his sworn enemy.
He called on the Freikorps, the Free Corps. Now, you have to understand, these guys were not regular soldiers. They were hardcore, right-wing, anti-communist ex-soldiers who'd come back from the war but never put down their guns. And here's the crucial part. They hated the communists way more than they cared about this new democracy.
And this is what happened. The government essentially unleashed a far-right paramilitary force on a far-left uprising. The streets of Berlin turned into a brutal battlefield. It was an all-out street fight between two totally opposite visions for what Germany should become.
And we're not talking about a small militia here. Look at this number. By March, just a couple of months later, there were 250,000 men in the Freikorps. This wasn't just some backup force. It was a massive, violent organization that the government had empowered but had absolutely no way of controlling. The end came swiftly, and it was brutal. The revolt was crushed, Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht were captured and then murdered without a trial. So yes, the government survived, but at a terrible cost. By using the far right to kill the far left, Ebert's government created a wound on the left wing of German politics that would never, ever heal.
So, about that deal with the devil? Yeah, the bill was about to come due. Just a little over a year later, the very same men who saved the Republic decided they wanted to take it for themselves.
So the government, trying to follow the rules of the Versailles Treaty, ordered the Freikorps to disband. And the Freikorps, well, they just said no. In fact, they turned right around and marched on Berlin to overthrow the government, led by a politician named Wolfgang Kapp.
And this is where you see the massive double standard. When the left revolts, the government sicks the Freikorps on them. But when the right revolts, the regular army refuses to fire on the Freikorps, saying, hey, we don't shoot our own, and the government has to literally pack its bags and run away.
So if the army won't save the Republic, who will? Well, the people will. The government, now on the run, called for a general strike. And ironically, workers all across Berlin, many of whom were socialists who despised Ebert, walked off the job. They shut the entire country down. No electricity, no water, no trains. Kapp's coup just fizzled out. It was over in 4 days. Okay, so the Republic has survived a left-wing uprising and a right-wing coup. But the next crisis wasn't going to be fought with guns. Oh no, this one was fought with money, and it threatened to tear the very fabric of German society apart.
In 1923, Germany was struggling to make those massive war payments from the Versailles Treaty and missed a shipment. France and Belgium didn't just send a strongly worded letter, they sent in their armies and occupied the Ruhr, Germany's industrial heartland. This was like seizing the engine out of the country's entire economy.
And this set off a catastrophic chain reaction. The German government couldn't fight back with its army, so it told all the workers in the Ruhr to just go on strike, passive resistance. But then, how do you pay all those striking workers? Well, you just fire up the money printers. And when you have way more money flooding the system, but nothing is being produced, the value of that money just plummets.
I mean, just look at this. This captures the sheer insanity of it all. The German mark became so worthless that it was literally cheaper than firewood. Kids used stacks of banknotes as toys because that's all they were good for. It was just paper. And for adults, this was a living nightmare. Imagine everything your family had ever saved, built up over decades, just gone, vanished overnight. The middle class was effectively wiped out. You'd get paid in the morning and have to run to the store before your wages were worthless by the afternoon. The social damage was just unbelievable.
So, after all that chaos, the violence, the coups, the economic collapse, where did things stand? Well, the Republic had been through an absolute trial by fire. It was deeply wounded, scarred, and bleeding. But amazingly, it was still standing.
I mean, just take a second to recap what this brand new democracy survived in just its first 4 years. An attempted communist revolution, an attempted right-wing military coup, a foreign occupation of its industrial center, and an economic meltdown so complete it's literally the textbook example of hyperinflation. Any one of those could have been a fatal blow.
And that brings us to our final big question. The Weimar Republic survived. That's a fact. But how it survived is the real story. It turned to violent paramilitaries. It deliberately destroyed its own currency. So you have to wonder, in that desperate struggle just to live to see the next day, had it already poisoned its own future?